What is Hajj Badal? So the Hajj Badal, which we can translate as the proxy Hajj, is a Hajj that you can actually perform on behalf of someone else. It's one of those acts of worship that you can do on behalf of someone else, which our Prophet ﷺ confirmed, famous narration in Sahih Muslim, where a woman came to him and asked on behalf of her mother who had passed away, can I perform Hajj on her behalf, because she has not actually performed the Hajj? And our Prophet ﷺ informed her that yes, indeed, you can perform the Hajj on her behalf. So this is where the concept of Hajj Badal comes from. Now, a few things to bear in mind before we move forward. Number one, it is that you yourself, if you are planning on performing Hajj on behalf of someone else, be it a relative or anyone else, you must have performed the Hajj yourself first. So you cannot just go and perform the Hajj for someone else when you yourself have not performed the Hajj, especially if it's an obligatory fard upon you already by this point. So let's now assume that you have already performed the Hajj and you would like to perform it for someone else. There are a few other rulings which the scholars mention. Who can you perform the Hajj on behalf of? There are those who perhaps have a long-term sickness and they have no hope of recovery. So some of the scholars mention, yes, you can do it on behalf of such people. There are those also who have passed away. So no doubt you can perform it on behalf of those people as well. But some of the scholars, they do discuss a bit further and they say, well, what if it's someone who is extremely poor and they cannot afford to go for Hajj? Obviously, we keep in mind, number one, that it's not actually an obligation for that person to perform the Hajj anyway. And number two, the scholars say, that person, we don't know, in future, they might somehow have the sufficient funds to go for Hajj themselves. So actually you can't perform Hajj on behalf of someone who, for example, is poor, or someone who is just not well that year, because they might recover and be able to go again themselves. So it's quite specific, and that's what you need to keep in mind. And usually you will find that a lot of people, they do it for those who have passed away from their family members, as we find in this authentic hadith in Sahih Muslim. So that's in a nutshell what the Hajj Badal is. And nowadays, logistically, it's quite easy to organize that. You can contact tour operators who can actually facilitate. Even if you can't do it yourself, they can actually allocate someone to perform the Hajj Badal. So just keep those rulings in mind, inshallah, but understand that Hajj Badal is actually an amazing way to fulfill someone else's legacy.
Follow us and subscribe now on all things Hajj and Umrah.